Rain tapped softly against the windows as Claire Morgan, 34 years old, sorted through invoices at her kitchen table. Her husband, Ethan, was upstairs helping their daughter finish a science project. Life was peaceful. Until... 3 slow knocks echoed through the house, not hurried, not nervous, almost confident. Claire opened the front door. Standing there was a man she hadn't seen in 10 years. Her father. His gray hair was thinner, his shoulders slightly bent. In one hand was an old leather briefcase. In the other, not a single envelope. No hug, no apology, no, "I've missed you." Instead, he said quietly, "Claire, we need to discuss something important." She stared at him. For 10 years. Not a birthday, not Christmas, not when her daughter was born, nothing. Now he stood on her porch, and somehow, she already knew this visit wasn't about love. It was about something else. But what Claire found inside that envelope would explain exactly why her father had returned after an entire decade. 10 years earlier. Claire grew up in the quiet town of Maple Ridge. Everyone knew everyone. Her father owned the largest hardware store in town. Her mother volunteered at church every Sunday. Her younger brother, Jason, could do no wrong. Jason got praised for average grades. Claire earned academic awards and was simply expected to. She learned something very young. Love inside her family was earned. Approval was conditional. Still, she dreamed bigger than Maple Ridge. She won a scholarship to study finance hundreds of miles away. The day she left, her mother hugged her tightly. Her father only said, "Don't forget where you came from." At the time, it sounded caring. Years later, she realized it was a warning. College would introduce Claire to someone her parents would never accept. During her second year, Claire met Ethan Brooks. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, he was simply kind. They met because both arrived early for statistics class every Tuesday. One morning, the professor never showed. Instead of leaving, they spent 2 hours talking. Dreams, books, business ideas, family, everything. Ethan wanted to build software that helped small businesses survive. Claire loved numbers. She loved solving problems. Together, they made sense. 3 years later, they were inseparable. Then one snowy evening, Ethan asked, "Will you build a life with me?" Claire smiled before he even finished asking. She thought telling her parents would be the happiest phone call of her life. She couldn't have been more wrong. Claire called home immediately. Her mother answered. Claire excitedly announced, "I'm engaged." Silence. Long enough to count. Finally, her mother asked, "To Ethan?" Claire smiled. "Yes." Another silence. Then, "Your father isn't going to like this. Yeah, no congratulations, no excitement." Minutes later, her father picked up another extension. His voice remained cold. "Come home before you make a mistake." Claire laughed nervously. She thought he was joking. He wasn't. 3 days later, in Pamel, an envelope arrived. Inside, a handwritten letter. Every sentence felt colder than the last. The final paragraph changed Claire's life forever, and the letter ended with one sentence. "If you marry him, don't expect to come back to this family." Claire reread those words again and again. She hoped she misunderstood. She hadn't. When Ethan found her crying, he didn't ask her to choose. Instead, he quietly said, "Whatever happens, you won't face it alone." That sentence healed more than any apology ever could. Claire folded the letter, placed it inside a folder, not because she planned revenge, because somehow she knew she'd need to remember it. Weeks later, Claire walked down the aisle without either parent beside her. Their wedding wasn't glamorous. 30 guests, a botanical garden, simple white flowers, friends, laughter, hope. Ethan's mother cried during the ceremony. She hugged Claire afterward. "You're my daughter now." Those 5 words nearly broke Claire because they were everything she'd wanted to hear from her own family. A week later, Claire mailed wedding photos back home. She included one sentence, "I hope someday you'll be happy for us." 11 days later, the envelope returned unopened, stamped "Return to Sender." Claire stared at it for several minutes, then quietly placed it inside the same folder. She didn't realize she had just started collecting evidence that would one day change everything. The first returned envelope became item 1, birthday card, sure, item 2, Christmas card, item 3, each rejection carefully dated, organized, stored, not because Claire wanted revenge, because facts couldn't be rewritten. Years passed, the folder became a binder. Every ignored voicemail, every unanswered email, every returned letter, everything had its place. Ethan once asked, "Why keep all this?" Claire answered softly, "Because memories fade, documents don't." While her family erased her, Claire and Ethan were quietly building something extraordinary. Ethan quit his secure engineering job. Everyone thought he was crazy except Claire. Together, they transformed their garage into an office, secondhand desks, old computers, whiteboards covered in ideas. Claire worked full-time during the day, helped with finances every night. Money became tight. Some months, they barely broke even. But neither complained. Every obstacle became another lesson. Slowly, their software improved. Their first customer arrived, then another, then 5. Just as their business finally found momentum, life delivered an even bigger surprise. Claire gave birth to twins, a son, a daughter. The delivery was exhausting, but hearing Ethan whisper, "They're perfect," made every painful moment worthwhile. His mother immediately traveled across the country. She cooked, cleaned, stayed awake during sleepless nights. Claire mailed baby photos to her parents. Weeks later, every envelope came back unopened. Not one photograph remained. She quietly added them to the binder. But the cruelest rejection wouldn't come from her parents. It would come from her own brother. Months later, a mutual friend accidentally forwarded Claire a screenshot. It showed her brother texting someone. "She made her choice. Those kids don't need us." Claire didn't cry. She simply printed the screenshot, slipped it into the binder. Item 9. She looked toward the nursery. Ethan was reading bedtime stories. Their twins laughed uncontrollably. Claire smiled because she finally understood something. Family wasn't defined by blood, it was defined by the people who stayed. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, someone in Maple Ridge noticed Ethan's rapidly growing business, and for the very first time in 10 years, Claire's family started saying her name again. Over the next 3 years, the garage office disappeared. A real office replaced it. Then a bigger one, Ethan's software company, Clear Ledger Technologies, was becoming one of the fastest growing financial software companies in the Pacific Northwest. Claire left her corporate finance job. She became the company's chief financial officer. Now they were building something together, not just a business, a legacy. Their twins, Emma and Noah, started kindergarten. Life finally felt normal. One quiet Tuesday evening, Claire noticed an unfamiliar notification on LinkedIn. Someone from Maple Ridge had viewed her profile. She ignored it. The next day, another profile, then another, different account, same town. It felt, intentional. She didn't know it yet. Someone back home had started paying attention. A week later, an old high school friend would reveal why everyone in Maple Ridge suddenly cared about Claire again. "I'd buy her." Claire received a text from her childhood friend, Sarah. "This is going to sound strange." Claire called immediately. Sarah hesitated. "Yes, yeah. Your dad was asking questions about Ethan's company after church." Claire stayed silent. "He wanted to know how successful you two really are." That caught her attention. Her father had ignored every letter, every birthday, every holiday. But now, he wanted to know about company valuations, revenue, investors. Why? Sarah lowered her voice. "People in town think Ethan's company could become worth hundreds of millions." Claire thanked her and hung up. She stared out the kitchen window. Something had changed, not in her life, in theirs. Then an accidental mistake exposed a conversation her family never wanted her to see. Late Friday evening, Sarah called again. She sounded nervous. "I accidentally got added to your family's private group chat." Claire's heart skipped. Sarah quickly sent screenshots before being removed. Claire opened the messages. Her father, her mother, her brother, Jason. Every message discussed one topic: money. Jason had written, "If Ethan sells the company, they'll never even notice $1 million missing." Claire froze. Her mother replied, "We need to approach Claire carefully." Another message: "Don't ask directly. Start by rebuilding trust." Then another. She always was emotional. Claire couldn't breathe. For 10 years. They never wanted forgiveness. They wanted access. She printed every screenshot, added them to the binder, new section, new evidence. Claire wasn't angry anymore. She was preparing for something much bigger. That weekend, Claire told Ethan everything. He didn't interrupt once. He simply listened. After several minutes, he asked, "What do you want to do?" Claire thought carefully. "I don't want revenge. I want peace. But peace doesn't mean being unprepared." The following Monday, Claire scheduled a meeting with an estate attorney, not because she expected a lawsuit, because she expected manipulation. Their lawyer reviewed everything: trusts, assets, ownership, children's inheritance. Everything became legally protected. The attorney smiled. "If someone suddenly remembers their family, they won't be touching your children's future." Claire finally slept peacefully. Then, after 10 years of silence, her younger brother suddenly sent a text. The message appeared at 2:13 p.m. "Hey sis, been thinking about you." Claire laughed, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. 10 years. 3 words. "Been thinking about you." She ignored it. 3 days later, another message. "I'm in Seattle next week. Maybe we can grab coffee." Ethan looked at the phone. "It's your decision." Claire nodded. "I'll meet him, but not here." She chose a crowded downtown cafe, public, neutral, safe. Within 5 minutes of meeting Jason, Claire realized why he'd really come. Jason hugged her too tightly, too warmly. He complimented everything. "You look amazing. You've done so well. I've always believed in you." Claire counted 7 compliments. Then the questions began. Now, how big was the house? How many employees? Did Ethan still own most of the company? Was there another investment round coming? How much travel did executives do? Private schools, vacation homes, bonuses? Claire counted 37 questions, not one. Asked how she had survived 10 years without them. Not one included the word sorry. When they left, Jason discreetly photographed her SUV. Claire noticed, said nothing. She already knew he was gathering information. That night, Claire made a decision that would change the ending of this story forever. Back home, Claire opened the binder. She carefully wrote Item 21. Meeting with Jason, 37 financial questions, 0 apologies, vehicle photographed, intent appears investigative. She closed the binder, then looked at Ethan. "They're coming." Ethan nodded. "I know." Neither of them said another word. They didn't need to. 3 months later, the biggest business announcement of Ethan's career hit national headlines. Clear Ledger Technologies officially announced plans to go public. News outlets covered the story. Business podcasts interviewed Ethan. Financial magazines featured Claire. For the first time, their success became national news. Phones started ringing, emails multiplied, unknown numbers appeared daily. Claire ignored them all until one voicemail changed everything. The caller ID showed her father's name after 10 years. Claire finally heard her father's voice again. His voice sounded older, softer, almost fragile. "Claire, I saw you on television." Long pause. "I'm proud of everything you've built." Claire closed her eyes. Those were the words she'd wanted her entire adult life. Then he continued, "Your mother wants to visit." Everything changed. Not, "I miss you." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I wish I'd called sooner." Instead, "Your mother wants to visit." Claire replayed the voicemail 4 times. Every sentence sounded carefully chosen. 2 days later, another message arrived. This one was from her mother. Unlike a text, it was handwritten. Exactly like the letter from 10 years ago. The handwriting hadn't changed, neither had the tone. It spoke about a family moving forward, healing, the future, shared blessings, and not once did it say, "I'm sorry." Not once did it admit they had abandoned her. Claire folded the letter, placed it beside the original one from 10 years earlier, beginning and side by side. History had come full circle. She quietly whispered, "They still don't understand." Then she looked toward the front window. A strange feeling settled over her because somehow she knew this wouldn't end with letters. It would end with someone standing at her front door. 1 week later, An unfamiliar taxi stopped outside Claire's house. A gray-haired woman stepped out carrying a leather handbag and a folded piece of paper that would test everything Claire had spent 10 years rebuilding. The following Tuesday, Claire woke earlier than usual. She made coffee, packed lunches for Emma and Noah, helped Ethan straighten his tie before work. Everything felt normal. Too normal. Almost as if the house itself knew something was coming. At exactly 10:17 a.m., a yellow taxi pulled into the driveway. Claire watched through the kitchen window. The rear door slowly opened. Her mother stepped out. Margaret Morgan looked older, more gray hair, a slower walk. But her posture remained the same, perfectly straight, perfectly controlled. She looked around the property before walking toward the front porch, not admiring it, evaluating it. Her eyes measured the landscaping, the size of the garage, the windows, even the security cameras. Claire noticed everything, 3 slow knocks exactly like before. Claire opened the door. Neither woman moved. 10 years. Reduced to a few feet of silence. Finally, Margaret smiled politely. "Hello, Claire." Claire answered just as calmly. "Hello, Mom." Another silence. Then Margaret said, "I think we have a lot to discuss." Claire stepped aside. "You can come in." But instead of leading her into the living room, she guided her into the kitchen. The kitchen wasn't where guests were entertained. It was where important conversations happened, where truth lived. Within 5 minutes, Margaret would place something on the table that made Claire realize this visit had never been about reconciliation. Margaret carefully placed her handbag beside the chair, then removed a folded document, 3 neatly stapled pages. She smoothed each page flat. Every line had been typed, organized, calculated. Claire didn't interrupt. Margaret adjusted her glasses. "I've spent weeks thinking about this." Claire remained silent. Margaret began reading. "The house back home needs major repairs." Pause. "Your father wants to retire?" Pause. "Jason still owes money on his business loan." Another page. "There are medical expenses? And your niece's college tuition." She finally looked up. "We're family." Claire slowly reached for the papers. She read every number. Roof repairs and $82,000. Retirement support for $350,000. Business debt, $190,000. Medical expenses on $96,000. Monthly family assistance, $5,000. Total, more than $700,000. Claire looked back at her mother. "Is that everything?" Margaret smiled. "For now." Claire folded the papers neatly, placed them back on the table, then quietly stood up without saying a word. She walked toward her office. Margaret frowned. "Where are you going?" Claire answered without turning around. "To get my list." Margaret thought Claire was preparing a counteroffer. She had no idea she was about to face 10 years of documented truth. Claire returned carrying a thick navy blue binder. It landed gently on the table, heavy, solid. Margaret stared at it. "What is that?" Claire rested both hands on the cover. "I was made my side of the story." Margaret forced a smile. "I don't understand." "You will." Claire opened the first tab. Year 1. Inside, the first returned birthday card still sealed. The red postal stamp remained perfectly visible. "Return to sender." Claire slid it across the table. "I mailed this 2 weeks after my wedding." Margaret looked away. Claire continued. Then came the Christmas card, the anniversary letter, the ultrasound photo, every item, chronological, every envelope, still unopened. Claire never raised her voice. She simply read dates, facts, records, one after another. The kitchen became completely silent. Then Claire opened a page Margaret never expected to see. Claire turned to another section. Plastic sleeves protected printed screenshots. Margaret immediately recognized them. Her face changed. "Where did you get those?" Claire ignored the question. She calmly read aloud Jason's message. "Once Ethan sells the company, they can easily afford to help us." Another, "Don't mention money right away." Another, "Rebuild trust first, jurist." Margaret suddenly stood and, "You had no right to read those conversations." Claire finally looked directly into her mother's eyes. "My children had no right to lose their grandparents." Silence. Margaret slowly sat back down. Neither woman blinked. For the first time that day, Margaret stopped defending herself. Margaret's shoulders dropped. "I made mistakes." Claire waited. "I was stubborn." Still, no apology. Claire noticed. She quietly asked, "What exactly are you apologizing for?" Margaret hesitated. "I don't know." Claire nodded. That's the problem. You remember losing me, but not how you lost me. Margaret covered her face. The confident woman who had entered the house was beginning to disappear. Then Claire revealed one piece of evidence that changed everything. Claire carefully removed another envelope. Unlike the other, Ollie, this one had been opened, then resealed. Tape still held the flap together. She slid it forward. Do you remember this? Margaret stared. Claire opened it. Inside, a kindergarten photo. Emma missing one front tooth. Noah wearing an oversized backpack. Claire whispered, I wondered who opened it. Long silence. Finally, Margaret spoke. Your father? Claire froze. Margaret continued quietly. He wanted to keep the picture. Claire's heartbeat quickened. But, Margaret looked down. I told him to send it back. The room fell silent. For the first time, Margaret wasn't defending herself. She was confessing. Just when Claire thought she'd heard everything, the front door unexpectedly opened. Ethan walked inside carrying groceries. He stopped immediately. He saw Margaret. She slowly stood. For 10 years, they had never spoken. Margaret took one careful step forward. I'm sorry. Ethan listened. She continued. I judged you before I knew you. Another pause. I was wrong, Ethan answered kindly. I appreciate hearing that, but I'm not the person who needed those words most. He looked toward Claire, then quietly carried the groceries into the kitchen. Nothing more. Margaret watched him disappear. She finally understood. Respect could not be bought. Claire had one final question that would determine whether this visit ended in healing or goodbye forever. Claire folded her hands. I need one honest answer. Margaret nodded. If Ethan had never become successful, if we still lived in a tiny apartment, if no one knew our names, would you be sitting here today? Margaret opened her mouth. Nothing came out. 30 seconds passed. Then tears filled her eyes. She whispered, No. Claire closed the binder. That single word hurt more than every returned letter combined, because it was honest. But Claire's answer would surprise everyone. Claire slid the financial request back across the table. I'm not paying this. Margaret lowered her head. Claire continued, but I will pay directly for Dad's surgery. I'll make sure he receives the best treatment. No cash, no gifts, no checks. I'll help because compassion matters. Not because guilt works, Margaret cried quietly. Claire added one final condition. If you want a relationship with my children, you'll earn it. One visit, one birthday, one honest conversation at a time. No shortcuts. No pretending the past didn't happen. Margaret nodded. She understood. For the first time, months later, one small package arrived in Claire's mailbox that proved people really can change. 6 months passed. Every Saturday, Margaret visited. No gifts, no money, just time. She read books with Emma, built model airplanes with Noah. Sometimes she and Claire simply sat on the back porch, not talking much. Healing didn't happen overnight. It happened one honest conversation at a time, one afternoon. Claire opened her mailbox. Inside was a handmade birthday card. No request, no check enclosed, no speech about family. Just one handwritten sentence. Thank you for giving me a second chance to become the grandmother I should have been from the beginning. Claire smiled. She didn't forget the past. She never would. But she finally understood something. Forgiveness isn't pretending the wound never existed. It's choosing not to let it control tomorrow. She placed the card in the binder, not under evidence, but under a brand new tab. New beginnings. An original epilogue set 1 year later where an unexpected inheritance, a shocking confession from Claire's father, and a final family revelation bring the story to an emotional and satisfying conclusion. 1 year passed, life settled into a rhythm. Margaret never missed a Saturday. She never asked for money again, never mentioned the company, never hinted about inheritance. She simply showed up. Emma loved baking cookies with her. Noah insisted Grandpa Robert teach him how to build birdhouses. For the first time, their house felt complete. Claire noticed something different about her father. He smiled more, but behind those smiles, he carried something heavy, something he wanted to say, yet never did until one autumn afternoon. He asked quietly, Claire, can we take a walk? She nodded. Neither of them knew. That walk would uncover the biggest secret in their family. Robert admitted he'd hidden something from everyone for nearly 25 years. They walked through a nearby park. Leaves crunched beneath their shoes. Robert finally stopped. I need to tell you something before it's too late. Claire waited. When you were 12. I started a savings account. She looked confused. It was for your college. He smiled sadly. I added money every month. Over 10 years. Claire frowned. I already had a scholarship. Robert nodded. I know. So I decided to save it anyway. She looked surprised. What happened to it? Robert stared at the lake. Your mother made me close it. Claire froze. She said once you married Ethan, you didn't deserve it. Silence. Robert continued. I've regretted agreeing every single day. Claire's eyes filled with tears. It wasn't about the money, it was about knowing. Her father had once tried. But Robert had one final surprise waiting at home. When they returned, Robert carried a small cedar box. Its brass hinges were worn. He placed it on Claire's dining table. I couldn't save the account, but I saved these. Inside were dozens of keepsakes, elementary school drawings, honor roll certificates, old photographs, a newspaper clipping from Claire's high school graduation, even her kindergarten report card. Claire carefully touched each one. You kept all this? Robert smiled. I never stopped being your father. Claire whispered. I wish I'd known. Robert looked down. I wish I'd been brave enough to show you. Then Margaret quietly admitted something that stunned everyone in the room. Margaret held one of Claire's childhood drawings. She began crying, real tears, not controlled, not rehearsed. I was afraid. Claire remained silent. Margaret continued. My parents taught me reputation mattered more than happiness. I believed them. I thought if people judged our family, I'd failed. So instead, I failed my daughter. Nobody spoke. Finally, Margaret whispered, I spent 10 years protecting my pride and nearly lost my family forever. Even Ethan lowered his eyes. The room felt lighter because truth, and even painful truth, can finally make healing possible. Then Jason unexpectedly knocked on the front door. Nobody expected him. Jason looked exhausted. His business had failed. His marriage had ended. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit anymore, just faded jeans. He stood awkwardly. I owe everyone an apology. Claire didn't respond immediately. Jason turned toward Ethan. I'm sorry. I judged you because Dad did. Then he looked at Claire. I blamed you for leaving. But the truth is, you escaped. I stayed. For the first time, Jason accepted responsibility. Not excuses, responsibility. But Claire had one final lesson her entire family needed to hear. Claire invited everyone to dinner. Halfway through the meal, she pointed toward one empty chair. Emma asked, Who's sitting there? Claire smiled gently. No one. That's the point. Everyone looked confused. She explained, For 10 years, this chair stayed empty during birthdays, Christmas, Thanksgiving. I kept hoping someone would fill it. She looked at her parents. I don't want to spend another decade staring at empty chairs. Margaret quietly reached across the table. She held Claire's hand. Weeks later, the entire town of Maple Ridge witnessed something nobody expected. For the first time in 11 years, Claire returned to Maple Ridge, not alone. Ethan walked beside her. Emma and Noah skipped ahead. The whole town watched. Some whispered. Others smiled. People who once judged now greeted them warmly. Claire realized something. The opinions she'd feared most, yet had never deserved so much power. Inside the old church, Robert prepared to say something he'd never had the courage to admit publicly. After Sunday service, Robert stood, hands shaking. He faced the congregation. I need to confess something. Everyone turned. I failed my daughter. Silence. I cared too much about what people thought. I stayed silent when I should have protected my family. He looked toward Claire. I'm sorry. The church remained completely still. Then people slowly stood. Not applauding, supporting. Claire hugged her father. Years of silence ended in one embrace, but the story wasn't quite over. Months later, Claire and Ethan created something new, not another company, a foundation. It offered college scholarships to students rejected by their families because of race, religion, relationships, or personal choices. Its slogan read, No dream should depend on someone else's approval. Hundreds applied, dozens graduated. Every scholarship represented a life changed. Pain had become purpose. Claire would leave her children with one lesson they'd never forget. Years later, Emma asked, "Mom, were you angry at Grandma?" Claire smiled thoughtfully. For a long time, Emma asked, "Why aren't you anymore?" Claire looked around the dinner table, her parents laughing with Noah, Ethan helping serve dessert, Jason teaching Emma a card game. Then she answered, "Because forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering and choosing not to become the hurt that hurt you." Emma smiled. "I think I understand." Claire nodded. "I hope you never have to." She looked around the table. This time, every chair was full, not because the past disappeared, but because everyone finally chose the future. The strongest families aren't the ones that never break. They're the ones where people have the courage to admit when they were wrong, rebuild trust through actions, and choose love over pride.